Okay, this video is about applying Aristotle's views of virtue and vice and politics and the good life, practical wisdom, to Euripides' play Hecuba. Hecuba, the Greeks have, their word for it is so different from the way we say it in English, but once again, there are many, many layers, many things I could say, and so I have to try and limit it. Um, so here's the story, the plot is Troy has been defeated, the city has been sacked, Agamemnon is coming back, and on his ship he has Cassandra, and also he's brought Polyxena, Hecuba's one of her other daughters. He has Hecuba. So Hecuba, Cassandra, and Polyxena are all on the ship, and they're slaves now. And the winds die down. So the Achaeans ask for hospitality from Pauline Esther, the monarch, the king in Thrace. So now they're in Thrace waiting for the winds to come up again. Odysseus has decided that he hears the ghost of Achilles asking, saying that Achilles is the one who caused the winds to die because Odysseus had promised to give Polyxena, the beautiful virgin princess, to the Achaean soldier who fought the most bravely. And Achilles now is speaking from the grave to claim his prize. He thinks he was bravest and he deserves the prize. So Odysseus decides he's going to have to kill Polyxena. So the play opens when Odysseus comes to get Polyxena, and Odysseus and Hecuba have a very heated discussion about whether this is really the best thing for Odysseus to do. Very important um, patterns there to notice. Hecuba has the better argument, but she loses because she doesn't have power. Then Polyxena dies, and she dies nobly, and Hecuba is happy to hear the story of how noble her daughter was. Then Hecuba had actually sent her youngest son, Polydorus, to Thrace because the king there, Pauline Esther, was a good friend of her and Priam, and they had hospitality between them, and she trusted Pauline Esther with her son, and she also sent with him a lot of money. Obviously, Hecuba thinks, rightly, her greatest responsibility is to provide a male heir to the city of Troy. So, just in case all of her other sons die in the war, she has sent the youngest one and entrusted him and their money to Polynestor. Okay, after Polyxena has been killed and Hecuba is mourning her fate, um, she finds the I think first she has a audience with Agamemnon, and he tells her, this is very important, that once they get back to Attica, he will let her go free. She can live with her daughter humbly in a nice house and just live out her life there. Okay, then Hecuba finds out the body of her son is washed ashore, and she figures out that Pauline Esther has killed her son, who is also the last male heir because all of her other sons have been killed, in order to get the money. Then Hecuba changes. Her personality completely changes. When she's talking to Odysseus, she's very perceptive about political authority and what politicians can and can't do, and she has good reasons. So she's obviously had power and thought quite a bit about phronesis, practical wisdom, even though she did not personally have the power to issue the commands. In Homer, she was close to Hector, and Hector asked her to sacrifice to Athena. She seems to be, it seems that her opinion might have been different than Priam's about whether to give Helen back. She was just playing her role, doing her duty, and Helen lived with her. But now she's a slave, and once she finds out that Polynester has killed her son, her youngest, she turns to vengeance. She wants revenge. And she will do anything to get it. She basically goes mad. She loses her mind. And she vows revenge. So Agamemnon returns. And she tells him what's happened. And he feels really sorry for her. And then she asks Agamemnon to give her a private audience with Polynester so she can take her revenge. And at first Agamemnon says, "No way." But she convinces him. She's very wise and intelligent. She's not wise, she's intelligent, she's smart. She knows how to punch those guys' buttons. She has the worst argument, but she wins. And Agamemnon lets her have a private audience. She asks her ladies in waiting, doesn't do the deed herself, to she also meets with him and his two sons, who are the two last heirs to his city. She has her ladies in waiting kill both of those sons and blind Polynester. Then Agamemnon, when Polynester is furious, Agamemnon returns and he says, "Okay, I will be the judge of this. I will determine who deserved what." Polynester, he's blind, so he doesn't quite get what's going on. He makes his case. He deceptively says, "Well, Agamemnon, since you won the war and you were on our shores and you knew that I was good friends with the Trojans and with Hecuba, I killed him to show you that no, I'm not associated with them anymore. I'm going to associate myself with you." So he tries. It's totally deceptive. Agamemnon does not buy it. Polynester figures out that the two have been in cahoots, and that he can figure out now that that Hecuba had asked Agamemnon to give her a private audience. And he even figures out she must have told him what she was up to. So Pauline Esther curses Agamemnon and Hecuba, and he predicts, he's a prophet, he predicts to Agamemnon that when he gets home, his wife is going to stab him to death. And he predicts to Hecuba that she will die on a ship, but she will have tied herself to a mast, and she will have a reputation as being a quintessential bitch or dog, and being a dog is a terrible insult. So she will go down as a dog in history. Hecuba couldn't care less, and the play ends. All right, so I'm going to try within an hour to summarize some of what I think is important about the play. First of all, when Hecuba and Odysseus have their debate, it's a good example of the difference between having knowledge and having wisdom, because each one of them marshals facts to support their conclusion. And they also argue about the nature of a ruler and the relationship between the ruler and the ruled. So Hecuba points out she wants him to save her daughter. She tells him, Odysseus, I saved your life. You were in our apartment at one point, and I disguised. I knew it was you, and I did not kill you. And look what you've done to me, my family, my city. You should give me this one break. Do this one thing for me. And then Odysseus returns by saying, I promised to my soldiers that I would give a virgin, Polyxena, the princess, to the man who fought the bravest. And politicians cannot break their promises to the people, because what would happen if we had to go to war again? The troops won't be motivated, and they won't trust me if I tell them they're going to get some reward. So I have to keep my promises. All right, what's the problem here? Well, first of all, supposedly the whole issue of the war was hospitality and the preservation of the rule of law or hospitality agreements, the preservation of goodwill and trust between different city-states. If you can't trust that they're telling you the truth, you're going to have constant war and preparation for war. That was supposed to be the reason they went to war, and that should have been what Odysseus communicated to his troops. He should not have given him a sex toy as a reward. He should have said, we are doing this because it's noble, because it's right, because it's civilized, because we are going to war to preserve civilization and human well-being. Now, given that the Greeks all know the biggest threats to stability are Aphrodite and Ares, pleasure, especially sexual pleasure, and war, and that they're highly attracted to each other, it's very crazy, inappropriate for Odysseus to use sex with a beautiful young virgin as the reward for fighting bravely, because that shouldn't be their motive. That's a very low, uh, cynical view of human nature. It's expecting very little of your troops. It's trying to get the troops motivated by the desire for sex. That was what motivated Paris. And that's how the war started in the first place. And Priam defended his son. So supposedly we are flushing that out. No, Odysseus basically did the same thing on the other side. He used sex as a reward. So, so in both cases, the leaders assume people are driven by sex, especially young people, and in Priam's case, he protects his son. He feels sorry for him. He thinks it's okay. And in Odysseus' case, he inspires the troops with his fantasy of having sex with a beautiful woman. Anyway, it was a really stupid idea and very hypocritical. So then Hecuba, but Hecuba doesn't say that. The principle is a principle of political necessity. So Odysseus says, I'm sorry, Hecuba, my hands are tied. I have to make good on my promises, or else all hell's going to break loose. We will have no social order. Hecuba is very perceptive in her response. She says, no, people can understand. You don't have to be cut and dried black and white. And this is exactly like Agamemnon thinking he had to kill Iphigenia brutally and heartlessly. Okay? Odysseus thinks since he made a promise, he's going to have to kill this innocent young girl brutally and heartlessly because he made a promise. And Hecuba is just saying, no, if the people know that you have a good character, you can change your mind and you will not lose goodwill and trust necessarily. And she's right about that, and she gives good arguments. So it's clear that she's intelligent and she knows the difference between just rule and unjust rule. And she knows how to act in a particular situation. Phronesis. But Odysseus, when he tries to answer, and maybe in his mind it's all cut and dried and black and white, but he wraps it up by telling her, you horrible barbarian Trojans, you can't even keep your hospitality agreements, so you deserve to suffer, you deserve to lose, you have no claims to tell me how to rule, because you are so corrupt. So, in about 2 scenes later, Agamemnon is going to destroy or break a hospitality agreement. So, so Odysseus' self-righteousness is about to be completely blown out of the water, but he thinks his city is the best. He has a superiority complex, and Hecuba just, there's nothing she can do. End of argument. End of argument is this self-righteous condemnation of the Trojans as barbarians. Okay, then he takes Polyxena and takes her to the altar. Well, first of all, he asks Neoptolemus to do the dirty work, just like he did before in getting Philoctetes to come to Troy. Now he asks Neoptolemus one more time to kill an innocent woman, someone his age. And so you can see how all this stuff might lead from Neoptolemus being a rather honorable young man to being a totally corrupt middle-aged person. Um, anyway, so the story of Polyxena when she's going to her death. First of all, the troops are holding on to her, assuming she's going to resist and all of that. Then she just says, let go of me. I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to freely go to my death. And then she tells her story, right? When I was born, I expected someday that I would marry and live the life of a princess. I had no idea I was going to end up a slave and also be killed, so that I could have sex with Achilles, the enemy of my city. But she did not say things like, you Achaeans are barbarians for killing an innocent woman. She doesn't say, those who kill will be killed, you'll pay in the end. She doesn't have any, she doesn't think about bitterness. She doesn't feel sorry for herself. Oh, woe is me. Instead, she has rational courage. She does what's noble because it's noble in the face of inevitable death at an early age. She exhibits more courage than any of the soldiers did in the war. So she kneels down at the altar as soon as the soldiers let go of her without hesitation. And this is another criteria for character, is in the critical moment you act without hesitating, without thinking twice, without any mixed motive or mixed desire. You desire to do what's noble because it's noble. So she leans down on her knees and throws open her clothing so that she exposes her breast, and she tells Neoptolemus, go ahead, stab me right there. And Neoptolemus hesitates. So, of course, the powerless one is powerful, and the powerful one is powerless. He hesitates. The likely thing would be she would be resisting and hesitating, but no, it's a reversal. So then he does kill her, but the soldiers are really taken aback, and they instantly regret. I mean, it's obvious they're really afraid that they violated the gods, because she wasn't this barbarian Trojan. She wasn't the kind of person that they'd been taught to think the Trojans were, that Odysseus clearly condemned the Trojans for being. She was noble, and they said that, and they said, come on, you guys, get leaves, cover up the body, which is the first duty to the gods, is to bury the dead. So they're just scrambling to make sure this body gets buried. And so it's clear that Odysseus is going to go down in history as having made a mistake in judgment. And when he's arguing with Hecuba, he says, no, I have to act on principle, because otherwise I will be remembered as someone who made the wrong choice. And I want to, my legacy, first of all, he worries about his legacy. One of the aspect of it is that he made a promise and kept it. The other one, of course, is that he wants a virgin too when he dies. So anyway, after this choice, after what actually happened, it seems pretty clear that Odysseus' legacy is not going to be very good. When they were actually debating about it, the vote was close, and Odysseus and Agamemnon disagreed. And Agamemnon couldn't argue too forcefully, however, because he was sleeping with Cassandra. So once again, this using women as spoils of war is an infection on all aspects of war. So it's infecting Odysseus' point of view, and it's infecting Agamemnon. So Agamemnon didn't think Polyxena should be killed, but he um, couldn't argue that too forcefully because people would just say, well, that's because Cassandra's sleeping with you and you're convinced by her, and she doesn't run our city. You're supposed to be the king, not her. And so Achilles also used apparently some real manipulative rhetoric and manipulated the soldiers into voting on his side. And obviously, it didn't turn out. History would say that was not the right choice. Anyway, so then Hecuba gets the news from a slave, and at this point in the play, slaves on both sides, a Trojan slave and an Achaean slave, say things that indicate that slaves have humanity, that we all have a common humanity, and the slaves sometimes are more empathetic and more basically decent than the powerful people. So one of the slaves, when he hears about Polyxena, or when he sees what happens, I can't remember if he was actually there, he says, nobility of birth is something that we're just born with, but nobility of character is something that you earn through effort. And he knew that Polyxena had both, but what really mattered was she had nobility of character. So he's a slave, but he knows that some people who are born into nobility are not good people, and he knows decency and rational choice when he sees it. Then the other slave came to tell Hecuba about the killing of Polyxena, and when he sees Hecuba grieving, he really feels empathy for her, even though he's an Achaean and she's a Trojan. So again, a slave, a mere slave, has common empathy with people. He doesn't judge people on the basis of all their political associations or their power or their wealth. So slaves obviously shouldn't be treated as if they're undignified, and people with power ought to think twice about what it really means to be a good leader and a good or bad person. Okay, so then Hecuba is moaning about the loss of her daughter, and then the women in waiting, her helpers, come with the body, and then she goes crazy. And Agamemnon comes and tells her she could be free, and he uses that word free. So the word freedom is used 3 different times in really important contexts. Polyxena performs the ultimate free act. Hecuba had a choice. She had a real choice. She could have lived freely, as Agamemnon describes it. If she had lived that way, she would have shown to the world, to the rest of the city-states, she would have represented, because she represented her city-state. These rulers are icons, right? They're archetypes of, but they also have a responsibility to their city, because the way they act determines the reputation of their city. So, if Hecuba had accepted that and just lived out her life, people would have felt sorry for her, and they might have thought twice about the sack of Troy and whether the Trojans were really so awful. Hecuba and Polyxena would have lived out their lives as noble human beings who, their city made a mistake. They suffered for it. People could have learned, okay, we're not going to do what Troy did, because We can identify with Hecuba and Polyxena. Normal people make these mistakes. We could make these mistakes, right? She could have represented pity and fear, identification, fear, and education. Nope, that's not what she wanted. So she asked Agamemnon, she told him the story about how she trusted Pauline Esther with her son and what he did and that he betrayed her and all for money. And Agamemnon was upset, right? Because leaders of city-states should honor hospitality agreements. And so Polynester did not honor a hospitality agreement. And Agamemnon could have said, well, you didn't either, Hecuba, and that's why we had to go to war with you, as you broke a hospitality agreement. So, okay, the Trojans broke one, and Polynester broke one. And then Hecuba asks Agamemnon to give her an audience so she can take revenge. Well, Agamemnon doesn't say what he should have said, which is, wait a second, I have a hospitality agreement with Polynester. My guys were going to starve unless he accepted them. And if I break it, the Thracians might come and just slaughter my people, right? I have a responsibility to my city, to my soldiers. There's no way, Hecuba. You're my enemy. You're a slave. I'm not going to let you get a private audience. I'm not going to let you have any power. I'm not going to betray my hospitality agreement with Polynester. What are you talking about? And Agamemnon should have said it's political necessity. He did not. Hecuba gave a speech that totally punched his buttons. Oh my gosh, she knew exactly what to tell this guy. First of all, she even used her daughter. She said, well, you're enjoying the pleasures of Cassandra, so you might owe me a little bit there. And then, that's not her main thing, but she pulls out all the stops. Her main thing is, and this is a quote that she uses when she's trying to convince him. She says, the gods are strong, and over them there stands some absolute, some moral order or principle of order more final still. Upon this moral order the world depends. Through it the gods exist. By it we live, defining good and evil. All right. We already know that Odysseus appealed to a similar principle, right? That if you make a promise to your people, you have to keep it. It's part of the moral order, and we ought to rule according to the moral order. Well, we've already seen that there was a higher moral order than that, which is you don't kill innocent girls and you don't motivate your troops with the promise of sex, and you stay focused on hospitality agreements. So we already know that what Aristotle says, everybody has good opinions, everybody has good principles, just like Agamemnon in the Aeschylus. But because of weakness of character, they don't apply them correctly in the particular situation. So Hecuba appeals to the higher ground, right? This guy has done a horrible thing, and you have the power to rectify the wrong. You just have to let me have an audience with them. And and when Agamemnon says, well, but political necessity, I can't do this, she digs again and says, well, of course you can do it. You're the most powerful guy in the world. You just won the war. I mean, if you can't rectify the wrong, who can? right? Um, so you have the power to do it. Your conscience should be your guide. You should, because you have this power, you should want to use it to redeem this injustice and to help me help you do this. And she says, if you aren't free to do this, who is? And so again, she uses the word freedom, which is what Euripides is trying to get us to think about. Because because of the human condition, nobody is free. Nobody has the power to literally establish good and evil. There's a higher moral order, and human beings, because of the human condition, depend upon each other too much, and they shouldn't try to believe that they can act in a way that will absolutely cut and dried make the bad guys suffer, because life is more complicated than that. Agamemnon depended on the Thracians. He wasn't absolutely powerful. He also, by letting Hecuba have that audience, he showed both he showed the rest of the world, the Greek city-states, that the Achaeans do not honor hospitality agreements. That's what they're going to think. So they're just like the Trojans. So Odysseus uses sex as a motivator, which is just like the Trojans, and Agamemnon violates hospitality, which is just like the Trojans. So the difference is between, in principle, there's a moral order, and we try to act in ways that correspond to it. But we should not be deluded about the limitations of our ability to actually realize that, and our interdependence. So Agamemnon did not have the power to vindicate the wrong, because he depended on Pauline Esther, and so he was betraying Pauline Esther. So on the one hand, he was trying to get him justice for what he did to Hecuba, but on the other hand, he was committing another injustice. And that's the way most human affairs are. That's why people have these absolute principles, but they usually apply them incorrectly because they're deluded about their situation, their interdependence. Anyway, so Hecuba does convince him. And, I mean, he really thinks he's right. And he's very self-righteous. Okay, so then, again, she has her ladies-in-waiting do the dirty work. And her relationship to those women is really pretty awful. Um, just like the relation between the classes is another issue that comes up. The slave class actually is more decent and humane than the ruling class, and also Hecuba just uses her ladies in waiting. Okay, the ladies in waiting are good people, and they're faithful to their husbands, and they're grieving the loss of their husbands. Incidentally, Hecuba, would you stop just feeling sorry for yourself? You're so self-absorbed. Didn't you notice the women who help you out also have? They're also unhappy, and they also are slaves. They have nothing. But she's going to make them do the dirty work, which of course is going to make them even more demonized and ostracized. But she doesn't think twice about it. She just uses people for her own whatever she happens to desire. So she's proving herself to be a barbarian. In other words, when she chose that option, revenge, rather than to live moderately and humbly, she represented her city. Okay, the Trojans are barbarians. The Trojans deserve to be sacked. And the other city-states are not going to let Troy come back, right? They want to keep Troy desperate and down. Whereas if Hecuba had shown the Trojans are humane people, the other city-states might have let Troy rebuild. All right. So then the next thing was Pauline Esther. He's an interesting character because he's uh, a king in a what you'd call third world or underdeveloped city state, right? So this is a lesson about how the people in the non superpowers ought to be relating to the people in the superpowers. So Troy and um, Attica, Agamemnon, represent the two superpowers, and the Achaeans defeated the Trojans, so now there's just one. But Thrace, Polynester, is not. He's a third player, right? He doesn't have the power the others have or had. And so, but he thinks now that he's got them wrapped around his finger, right? On the one hand, he's got the Achaeans totally dependent on him. And on the other hand, he's got the Trojans are decimated, and he's got all this money. And so he kills off their youngest son and takes the money. So he thinks in his mind that, hey, I'm pretty powerful. As a matter of fact, I'm more powerful than either of them. I'm not going to tell Agamemnon that because, of course, he won't like it. But as a matter of fact, it's true, and they're depending on me for hospitality. So Polydester gets a little full of himself, and he thinks he's pretty powerful. So when he comes to see Hecuba, he feels so sorry for her. And he says things like, gosh, it just seems like the gods are so arbitrary and they just do whatever they want, like we're playthings of the gods. And Hecuba, it's just not true. So that's an excuse for not figuring out the patterns. And then, of course, the people watching the play are supposed to go, wait a sec, no. That's just, Polynester is just trying to hide what's really going on. He just, the gods, we're this playthings. So then, after he gets blinded, he makes his case to Agamemnon, and he, uses this thing where, well, I just wanted to show you how loyal I am to you. But Agamemnon doesn't buy it, which is interesting. He could. Because I think the other issue there is that Hecuba really got him to empathize with her, with those two as the superpowers. And this Polynester is this little upstart who's trying to, he's full of himself and he's trying to gain some power over either one of us. And that's where Agamemnon, she touches that button because, again, the Achaeans, like Clytemnestra said, they're obsessed with power. And so any threat, Hecuba tries to indicate that maybe this guy would threaten your power. And so that's his button. I mean, that works. And so he's satisfied with what happened. The other thing that happened is that he had two sons, and Hecuba killed both of his sons. So we just have this constant bloodletting, all right? Agamemnon thinks, okay, now the bloodletting will end, and it's all over. And Hecuba thinks, I don't care. I couldn't care less. I got what I wanted. And and Hecuba is the one that really knows good and evil, and she just decides to choose evil, and that's it. And she's happy. Even though she's going to have this reputation, she doesn't care. Agamemnon and Odysseus are a lot more deluded. They have the superiority complex, they have power complex. And Polynester knew he was trying to get away with something. But the underdeveloped countries should really be careful because it hardly ever works. So in general, those are the main points I wanted to make. And then I wanted to just go back to Aristotle's criteria on tragedy. And I'm going to have to go to another video to sort of sum it up.